Again, my name is Randi Silverman. I am founder of the Youth Mental Health Project. I am so thrilled to have Christine uh,
Just say Christine M. You're good.
Christine M. That is so embarrassing. Who's the founder of Corc Yoga. She's not only the founder of Corc Yoga, which I can't wait for you all to learn about. She is also becoming a certified wellness practitioner. She's very passionate about the topic of mental health. She has also become a trained volunteer facilitator of the Parent Support Network, which is our program that we have at the Youth Mental Health Project to support parents, guardians, caregivers who are concerned about their children's mental health. And she has been an invaluable part of the Youth Mental Health Project, both supporting us financially, which has been wonderful through her wonderful company, Corc Yoga, and also just spiritually. And I'm thrilled to have her here. She, of course, is a yoga practitioner. And so I hope to bring together some discussion about yoga. And I just want you to get to know Christine and all that she has to share with us about her experiences. And so that's Christine. Hi, Christine. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's just wonderful to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Randi. It's an honor to
So,
be here.
So tell us a little bit about Corc Yoga. What is Corc Yoga? How did you start that company and why Corc?
Why Corc? I get that question a lot. I think often people don't know that cork is actually a tree. And the story is a long story, but I'll give you the short version. It really began with a trip that I took to Portugal. My husband and I left our kids at home. We decided just to take a week off, and I immediately fell in love with Portugal. I love the people, the hospitality, the generosity, and discovered Corc. They're the main producers of Corc. I dove into the history of Corc and how it ties into the traditions of the Portuguese culture, and just really wanted to create something to give back to the country. It's just a rich country and rich culture, and it really gave me a lot on my own journey. So
just in terms of, why do you think that is? I've heard it's beautiful. To be honest, I've never been to Portugal, but it is one of those places I'm dying to go. Was it just because of the nature, the beauty of it, the culture?
It truly, I guess the word I often use, it was a serendipity moment of I was at a very low place in my life. Just I'd like to contribute it to age, turning into my 40s, and we had suffered a big loss in our family, and so I was grieving a lot of loss. So when I got there, it's almost like your eyes are open to new things, and I was very warmly received there. I think, my husband actually says it very correctly. In Portugal, you're allowed to make mistakes. And it's a culture that gives a lot of grace, that you don't have to be perfect, that you can go without any judgment. And I was just like, I'll take it, right?
Oh, wow.
I was ready for it.
That is so beautiful. I mean, I think without really having thought of it before, that's true of what we do at the Youth Mental Health Project. And you and I have talked about, parenting in particular. We judge each other in our culture, and that leads to a lot of shame and blame, particularly if you're raising a child who is struggling with his or her mental health. And to be somewhere where you don't feel judged and it's okay to make mistakes because we are going to make mistakes, that lifts a huge weight, right? And so that,
absolutely.
and that how do we try to create, it's changing our culture into that, I think is too big of a goal, but how do we create places in our lives that can be that way, where it's okay to make mistakes. I didn't know that about Portugal. That's really incredible. Now I really want to go there more.
Yes.
And so I also am embarrassed to say I didn't know anything about Corc. So is Corc grown particularly in Portugal, manufactured in Portugal. Um, and
Yes.
is that how you discovered it? And then you said, oh, I should take this cork and turn it into yoga mats. I mean, how did you figure that out?
Well, it was actually, I was walking through like a market and discovered the material, and maybe it's my personality. I just became so intrigued. I came home. I literally wanted to give back to the country just because it filled me so much. And it was more of an emotional, I'm not talking materialistically. Food is great, culture is great, but it was just generally my tank was full and I wanted to give back. And so I dove into a year's worth of researching on cork. And the following year, I took my family back, visited multiple manufacturers, attended the harvest in person to understand how this works. And what was actually the most moving for me when I watched the harvest is how the farmers talk to the tree and ask the tree if she's ready to give. And they wait and they listen, and there's no machinery. And the tree knows what part of her bark is ready to release, and it's actually healing to the tree. And so the explanation to me was the whole metaphor behind cork is that because it's healing to the tree, it's able to regenerate for the following season.
So is it like a shedding?
It's a shedding. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely.
So that you don't cut down these trees then. They're not.
No. Yeah.
Oh, no
And
wonder
if there's
wonderful.
parts of the bark that are infected, she doesn't release that. So you can have a piece of bark and there's a little tiny piece that the tree is like, nope, I'm not going to give it this season. I'm waiting till the next season. And I think as parents, we all kind of understand seasons.
Oh, yeah. Right? Yeah. Seasons and phases and all sorts of things like that, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, that is so beautiful. I did not realize that. And then, so how does it translate into yoga? And what makes, I mean, the Corc Yoga mats. And by the way, Lisa, if you would put some links into the chat where people can look at these gorgeous yoga mats. I'm kind of sorry I don't have one right here. Do you have one you could show everyone, or maybe we could put a picture up of it? They're beautiful, beautiful products. I mean, we're not here to like push the products, but they're beautiful. But besides being beautiful, I wondered if there was some spiritual element of it that made you feel like it was an appropriate material for yoga mat. I mean, yoga mats are what, usually rubber or plastic or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Really, we wanted to create something that provided people with experience. Like, again, I'm a very passionate person, as you can see.
Yeah.
And I wanted to share, cork with the whole world. And I think, the yoga mat stemmed from that, because in Portugal, you can make bags and you can make jewelry and you can make all these different things. But a yoga mat truly represents the tree and what it provides, not just in terms of the healing process, but the industry in itself, livelihoods, fair trade, and all those different wonderful things when it comes to sustainability. I think the biggest benefit for me personally is that it's healing to your body. And I'm not talking about it heals your body, but it's healing, it's not harmful. So when we practice yoga on the plastic and rubber mats, all the fumes that we're inhaling kind of negate that relaxation we're supposed to feel. And I wanted to create something that was healthy for the body holistically. So
I would imagine for kids particularly, who are developing, right? And kids to me are older than they used to be, right? So like 26 is still a kid to me. But and we know that a child's brain does not finish fully developing until they're 26 years old. So I think of young people who are practicing yoga, and you're right, they're smelling the fumes. And I'm not trying to knock any other yoga mats, but there's a certain chemical release, and that can't be good for their brains, right? So there's the chemical aspect of being healthy,
Mhm.
and
Yeah,
the sustainability, and the cork, which is a natural, you know, gift from the earth, from these trees,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
That's beautiful.
yeah,
And then the practice of yoga itself, right?
yeah,
So, and
absolutely.
can you tell us? I am embarrassed to admit that I don't really know a lot about yoga. Um, I've always been a little intimidated by yoga. So I know downward dog and cat cow. I think
Those are great poses.
those are the ones I know. And but I've always been a little intimidated because I don't always understand the language, and I don't feel like I can keep up. And what if my body won't go that way? Um, so, what can you tell those of us who really don't already know? Why is it a good practice? Is it just I used to not realize it was exercise. This is embarrassing.
No, I think a lot of us come from that too.
So I'm wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about, what is yoga? Why is it good for us, both mentally and physically? I mean, I know that's a huge topic, but just to give us, those of us who are beginners, a little overview and context around it.
Well, I can tell you first what yoga is not. It's not headstands and handstands and poses on top
Whew.
of a cliff or a building, right? It's not that. It's really making it your own practice. And I think for me personally, it's been a journey of
Mm.
I'm not a very flexible person, and especially after kids.
Oof.
But it's a lot about being in tune with your connecting your mind and your body together. Because I
Right.
think so often we go through life disconnected. And yoga is kind
Oh,
of that
yeah.
bridge that connects our mental health with our physical health. And it
And
kind of quiets our mind.
is it through kind of the breathing part of it, along with the body movements, along with like being low on the ground? I mean, this is how I'm visualizing it
Yeah.
as a non-expert.
Well, I'm not an expert. I'm a learning expert. But I think it has all of those elements tied in together for sure. Now these days, I mean, there's so many different types of yoga. There's laughter yoga to yin yoga to, I mean, there's just, and each country and culture has their own type. So I
Right.
think at the end of the day, it's really about coming back to your breath, coming back to this present moment and where you're at, and not looking too far into the future,
Mm,
and just kind of taking that time, whether it's 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I know, Randy, we've talked a lot about gratitude in the past too,
mm,
and yoga is a lot of that.
mm. That makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. I forgot to tell everyone, those of you who are listening in, that we want to use the chat and the Q&A. If you have any questions for Christine or for me, we would really love to hear what your thoughts are. I'm just wondering, for those of you listening, do we have, are you beginners out there in yoga? Are you interested in learning more about basics, or are those of you listening experts, and maybe you have things to share? So please feel free to use the chat. And again, if you want to ask a question, but you don't want to share that question with the entire audience, if you use the Q&A, it'll just come to us, and we can then vet the questions and ask them so that you can ask private questions. You mentioned earlier that you're in Croatia because your son is in plays soccer, right? Is
Yes.
that, yeah, which is so incredible. And being the mom that you are, he's a junior, I think, in high school, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
That you're traveling to help him fulfill his dream, which is what we do as mothers as much as we can. But you mentioned that he was in the other room doing yoga.
Yeah.
Can you say more about that? That I'm so intrigued by. Um, he's how
Yeah,
old? He's doing yoga.
definitely. He's
How did he get to do that?
well, it's been maybe about 2.5 years. Um, it's taken a team effort from his therapist, and everyone's saying the same thing. Yoga is really good for you. And he's done a lot of breath work exercises and therapy with a colleague of mine. And so yoga's kind of been his daily routine. He for himself, he follows a YouTube teacher, and he does 30 minutes. And this YouTube teacher is more or less like an athletic YouTube teacher. So he plays soccer. So he's kind of found his niche instructor, and we'll follow him for maybe 20 minutes. But I think ultimately it's been really training him to step into this mindfulness practice.
Right.
And really meditate.
I think you're hitting on a bunch of really important things: gratitude, mindfulness, learning how to be in the moment, right, that you're in, and be comfortable in the moment that you're in, even if you're not comfortable, how to create a place of comfort in whatever moment you're in. And I'm guessing a lot of people don't realize how intertwined yoga is with all of that, right? So it sounds to me that if you're wanting to bring in more mindfulness and breathing and learning how to sit and live, in the moment, that practicing yoga is a good way to do all of that and stretch and is it also finding balance and strengthen, right? It helps your, I'll tell you, the handful of times I've taken yoga classes, it's hard. I thought it was going to be easy, and I was sore. It was real exercise, like I sweat in it.
It
And that,
is, it really
right?
is.
It really is. So it does help you, but it also sounds like there are different niches. I love this idea. Your son's a soccer player, so he found an athlete who he could relate to, who also practices yoga, right? And it never occurred to me that maybe there were different kind of niches. I mean, how would you go about looking for someone that sort of fulfilled your own? I don't know what the different types of yoga are. So how do you learn about that as a novice?
It takes a little bit of digging, but I think thankfully with Google, for me, it was more or less, we used to do yoga as a family. We would just get all of our mats out, and thankfully there's so many recordings available. But I noticed my kids would get a little bit restless, and a little bit they can't really work with the monotone and the really gentle tone with yoga. They're boys. They need a little bit more stimuli. And so I kind of saw that and thought, my boys are athletes. If they can find someone they connect with, because yoga is also that too. It's to be done in community, I think, unless you're a full-on expert and you can go to the mountains and practice on your own. But for our kids, they need connection. And that was really important for my kids, and finding what they enjoy and they're passionate about and tying that into yoga.
Yeah, that's so important. Connection is the root in so many ways of strengthening mental health. And I know with COVID, a lot of our kids have really struggled with the loss of connection in the way that young people are supposed to have it, right? While their brains are developing and they've been stuck at home or behind a computer, and it's been very difficult to connect. So I'm so glad you brought that up in terms of yoga being something that's meant to be done in a community. I've always thought of it as kind of a solo practice. I mean, it's not solo because you have to learn how to do it, but you have to, or like an exercise class. It's hard for me to visualize how do we create that for our kids? And where do we find that? Because you're right, connection is so important.
It really is. And they feed off of that energy, because then they don't feel as isolated. I think the pandemic just increased that isolation even more,
right,
with loneliness, and triggered a lot of that. Right.
Yeah, it's been really hard.
Yeah. I mean, I know for us in the past, we have, again, soccer, we have volunteered to teach yoga to the soccer teams. So a couple years ago for
Wow.
International Yoga Day, we had 60 soccer players practicing yoga in a big park together, and it was phenomenal. We had a male teacher come. He played soccer himself,
Wow. That's
and
amazing.
yeah, so the
Um,
impact is amazing. Yeah.
yeah, that's really incredible. International Yoga Day. It's coming up June 21st. Is that right?
Yes, it was
Yes.
actually last month. Yeah, June
Oh,
21st.
coming up. It shows you what
It's
month I'm
okay.
on. It's
We're moving too
July.
fast. It's July already. But September
Wow.
is National Yoga Month. And so I would encourage, parents to just kind of see what's offered in the community.
Right. And maybe promote it. I mean, I love
Yeah.
this idea of your kid plays soccer, for instance. You know, I was a soccer mom for a short period of time. My kids didn't play soccer for a very long time, but when they did, I was the typical, mom on the side. You get involved usually in those youth organizations, athletic organizations, and why not bring that idea, those parents out there listening, to the coach, or and say, hey, let's
Yeah.
bring in a yoga teacher, and have the whole team do this together. I'm sure there are a lot of tough guys out there who think that's like a girly thing, but it's so not. I mean, I think it's actually
Mhm.
probably harder for boys,
Yeah.
for the variety.
Yeah.
I have three boys also, so it's harder for them to, you know stay still or to stretch or to do those things. And so, what a great idea to bring them together as a community and find the
Wow.
right type of yoga that would speak to
Mhm.
them. I think that's true with everything. We talk a lot about the different types of treatments and therapies, in terms of mental
Yeah.
health, right? And when we're supporting parents through the Parent Support Network, you can have two kids that sound like they might be struggling with the same thing, but different approaches are going to help each of them because we're all very different. Some people
Yeah.
need a slower pace, some people need a faster pace, and connecting with the right practitioner of any kind, whether it's a
Yeah.
therapist, a life coach, a yoga practitioner, a nutritionist. We know we're not going to stick with something if we don't connect. And the same thing is true with our kids.
Yes.
We can't just tell our kids, well, go to that. That's what you're going to do. Well, if they're not connecting, it's
Mhm.
not going to work. So we have to work a little harder to find something that will help them connect. And it sounds like that's what you helped your son do, which is pretty incredible. I feel like, an
Yeah.
obvious question is, what Cork Yoga is not only giving back to Portugal by, bringing in more industry and jobs there through Cork Yoga, and giving back to the world by using these sustainable yoga mats, and contributing to wellness and health. And you've been wonderful about giving back to the Youth Mental Health Project. A portion of the proceeds of your sales you have been donating. Thank you so much to the Youth Mental Health Project, which has really helped our
Mhm.
programming and our mission to educate, empower, and support families about the importance of youth mental health. So I know it's probably obvious, but could you speak to why youth mental health, of all the different types of causes? Why do you feel that that's important? I mean, people have heard me talk about why they feel it's important, but I'm wondering why what inspired you, to want to support an organization around youth mental health?
Well, it to be honest, Randy, it really stems from my own personal journey first,
Mm,
as a teenager. And, in Asian American culture, there's a stigma around anxiety and depression, eating disorders, and all those different types of teenage girl struggles.
yeah,
And so, I struggled as most of us women probably did in our,
yeah,
young age bracket.
yeah.
That we weren't, able to talk about it. And so I just became a real advocate for that through my college years and my motherhood. And then, of course, my kids and their personal journeys. and then later on as a foster mom, and of course my husband and his journey. So things just kind of started to different layers,
Right.
and meeting moms who had struggled with similar journeys, and to know that, I'm not alone.
Ugh.
But to really understand that it takes a village to be passionate together, and to go, okay, we're going to help each other. And what I love about Youth Mental Health Project is that not only have you created an amazing community, Randi, but you're providing resources for us to feel empowered. And I think that's it right there, because we have to, in order for us to parent this generation. It's you can't put a price to it.
Yeah.
I mean,
like you said, it takes a village. I mean, we need each other. And
yeah.
I know that when I was a young mother of little kids, and my middle son was struggling and actually very ill. He was suicidal when he was 9 years old, and I felt so alone. Right. And to find other parents, I was sure it had to be my fault, that there was something I was doing wrong, and why my family. And it wasn't until I died, it wasn't until he got properly diagnosed and got into treatment that I started reading and researching and realizing, wow, I didn't know that this was a common issue. Why doesn't anyone talk about it? And I started to meet other moms, and in meeting, and mostly moms, I met some dads too. So I don't mean to poo-poo the dads, but because there are dads are clearly impacted as well. But that's when I realized that I wasn't alone, that it wasn't just me, that it's common. And I became empowered by meeting other moms like you who wanted to help people and wanted to make other families' journeys easier. So, I mean, we all start with our story of pain, I think, sometimes. And how do we turn that pain into purpose? Thank you for saying that. I didn't create this community. The community, we find each other. I have just tried to create a platform to make that easier, right? And certainly I haven't done it alone. We have a great team at the Youth Mental Health Project, and most importantly, a lot of great parent volunteers who run parents peer-to-peer parent support meetings that are free and confidential to parents who are struggling. Lisa, if you could put a chat in, I know I see you put a link in the chat to our website, but if you could put a link in the chat specifically to the Parent Support Network page, parents can go there and sign up to go to virtual, essentially, parent support meetings that are run by parents. And I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit. I'm passionate about it like you are, right? And you and I have talked about that. I would imagine you've had a similar experience when you're saying that you struggled when you were young, right? And the community around you didn't know. I'm guessing your parents didn't realize, right? And so what would you say to parents out there? Like what can we do as parents, if we want to help our kids? And I, of course, want to bring it back to yoga, but if you had any particular advice, what would you give? What would you say?
Wow, advice is a big.
Yeah.
I think maybe
That's a big question. I'm sorry.
It is a big question. I think personally, what has worked in my journey, because I know every parent has their individual challenges. I fault myself a lot sometimes for not listening to my kids, for not seeing them the way they need to be seen, and putting on my parent mode and forgetting. I'm going to get emotional if I go there, but I think just forgetting that they're a person, and that they, if they're having a tantrum, it's something so much deeper than that. And, we're exhausted and we're tired. And so sometimes I actually put it on myself where I'm like, Mom needs to go take a breath. I just need to do some breathing. I'll come back and let's revisit. You wait for me here. Because I think in the past, I'd be like, you take some time, and I would put it on them.
Oh, that's
But
so smart, Christine.
it's just,
It's just a tiny flip, but what a
yeah,
difference. I'm sorry, I
it's
didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, no, no. It's helped and it's worked for my kids. I don't know if it'll work for every child, but
No, that's really powerful, and kind of what you were saying earlier about Portugal. I think we tend to want to either fix
yeah,
our kids' problems or control them or teach them how
yeah,
to control themselves, right? I was brought up,
yes,
I think I'm older than you by a lot, and I was brought up in a world to believe, like, as a parent, your job to teach your children how to behave, and if you can't teach them how to behave and they're misbehaving, you're doing something wrong as a parent. As
yeah,
opposed to what you're saying, which is they're tiny humans who have their
hmm,
own brains, right? Their own feelings and
hmm,
thoughts,
yeah,
and their tantruming isn't necessarily reflection on your parenting, that you're not doing a good job as a parent. There's so,
right,
emotions fuel behaviors, and we sometimes forget that.
yeah,
And we also forget, I think, in our quest to help our children never feel pain, that mistakes help us become resilient,
yeah,
right? Back to
absolutely,
allowing mistakes to happen, because that's how we grow and
yeah,
learn. And our
yeah,
children need that to grow and
yeah,
learn and build resilience.
yes,
Um, and
absolutely, yeah,
right,
yeah, yes. I have a perfectionist in our family, and maybe similar to me, and I had to tell him the other day, make as many mistakes in life as you can. Try
yeah,
it, see what happens.
right. I play with my
Yeah,
one of my sons. What's the worst thing that can happen? And we go through, probably not a
yeah.
great game, but sometimes, but he needs to hear, oh, the worst thing isn't really so horrible. And
Yes,
usually the worst thing doesn't happen, right? But
yes,
even if it did, oh,
yeah,
I can survive that. Um, I'd love to
right.
hear from the audience out there. I know there are a bunch of you listening, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. I think, to me, it sounds like all of this relates to yoga and peacefulness and mindfulness, because you can't allow yourself or your child that space if
Mhm.
you're not, you know, in balance, right, in the moment with your body and your mind.
Yeah,
Um, right?
yeah, yeah,
That that
absolutely.
yeah. So that's incredible. Sorry, I'm overwhelmed with all sorts of thoughts, which, as you know, just sends me on a trail. Um, do we have beginners out there? Are you a beginner? If you're a beginner, is there anything you want to know about yoga? You had mentioned before, Christine, that other than Corc Yoga, which is your
Mm,
amazing company, that you have a link, I think you sent to Lisa, on resources for
yes,
people. Lisa, pop that link into the chat, and Christine, can you tell us what are those resources that you have found helpful and you think would be helpful to people in our audience? Yeah, thank you, Lisa.
absolutely. Yeah. So Yoga Ed is a website. It's a great resource that I've used, um, mainly because I wanted to understand the link between trauma and
Mm,
yoga and how yoga can help PTSD in kids. Um, and Yoga Ed has a great amount of videos on YouTube. If you want to go through their website and check out their resources, but they provide tools for families, for even children under 6 all the way to their teenage years. It's a great resource that I have found personally, but I
wow.
think great for parents. Yeah.
Oh, that's so great. We will definitely check that out. Maybe that's something we can share on our website as well. I think parents, we need resources. I always say
Yeah.
education is power, right? And
Yes.
you're saying learn about how this works. And
Yeah.
you can't help your kids if you don't first learn about it yourself. Oops, sorry about that. Forgot to mute my phone.
Absolutely.
Ding.
Yes.
And what have you learned about that along the way that you didn't know before? And how has it
Um,
informed, your parenting and the work you do?
well, I've learned that, well, like mentioned to you earlier, that there's different types of yoga for depression, for anxiety. So if you have a child that's high energy, there's different types of yoga that can help kind of stable the mind a bit and kind of ground
Mm,
them. If you have a child that's more so sluggish and kind of depressed, and there's other different types of yoga that kind of shifts the energy a little
mhm.
bit. When Does that make sense? And so
It's so logical. It just
that
never would have
it,
occurred to
yeah,
me before. Right.
yeah, and especially trauma and yoga. So I love research. I love looking things up and reading, understanding. And so I just think this website is amazing for that. And it just got me going on these different tangents and understanding what will work for my kids.
That's great.
Yeah.
And and for parents too, I would imagine, right?
Oh, absolutely. This website has everything for parents. I didn't want to say that because I didn't want to put it out there, but I think even just 5 minutes in the morning of just calming the mind. I know it sounds easier than, but it's hard.
So
Yeah.
I used to spend time in a hospital with a dear friend of mine who was sick with leukemia, and I would go and visit her, and they would do chair yoga. And so I would go with her sometimes
Um,
and do that and do this chair because she physically wasn't able to get onto the ground. And it was so powerful. Um,
mm,
and I don't remember much about it, but does that sound like something that you can
I've
speak to?
actually done it
Is there
myself.
some easy, like maybe we can do an easy, quick exercise we can teach people? I don't know. I'm kind of ready. I want to start right now. Do you have do you have something you can share with us that would be
I
a quick
wish.
practice, like breathing? Like how do you even start something like that? I just try to breathe, but I don't know if that's considered
It is.
yoga. It
It
is?
is. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, breath work is huge, and that's sometimes we need to increase our carbon dioxide, right? To get
Right,
more energy back to our brain
right.
and our mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm guessing that most of the people listening here um, know most of this, or they probably wouldn't have signed up. But that's why I keep asking if there are novices out there, or if you have any questions. I don't want us to be talking about things you already know when you're listening.
Yeah.
We do have a question, which is very exciting. This person wants to know if yoga can help you sleep better, which I think is a great question because exercise in general, I can't exercise in the evening. It keeps me up, which I know is
Yeah.
counterintuitive. But how, what, yeah, speaks to that question. Can yoga help you sleep better?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I think there's different types of yoga to help with that. Like I don't know if Kundalini yoga is popular where you're at,
What is it called?
but Kundalini yoga or Kundalini,
Kunda. Okay.
Kundalini,
Kundalini.
it's it's a very grounding practice. It puts me
Okay.
to sleep. I
Ooh.
literally, yeah.
So
So
are you laying on your yoga mat with your yoga clothes on doing this and then you fall asleep? Or is it one of the things that you kind of do in bed right before you go to sleep? I know this is a silly question, but I don't want to end up sleeping on my
yeah,
floor.
right? Well, now everything is done virtually.
That's true.
So, I follow several of our teachers, and they teach Kundalini Yin Yoga at night, and I have my mat next to my bed, and I just kind of roll into my bed.
Oh, I love that. I'm going to check that out. That was a great question, by the way. Sleep is so important to mental health. I know my middle son, who has bipolar disorder, his sleep cycles are incredibly erratic, and he has a very difficult time sleeping. And I have always thought meditation, mindfulness, yoga would be helpful to him. Of course, he's an adult and I can't get him to do anything I want him to do, but I keep slipping him little seeds of ideas, and every once in a while he'll say, "Hey, I had this great idea," as though it was his original idea. That's how I get my child to do things, is I let him think it's his idea slowly. But it makes sense that
Yeah.
that would be super helpful. Do we have any other? Oh, there's another question. Let's see. Thank you so much. Please keep the questions coming in. Would you be willing to share an instructor that you follow for the grounding type yoga?
Yes, absolutely. She's not local. She's in Portugal.
Does
But
she teach virtually?
she teaches virtually. So would you like me to plug her website in here?
Yeah, that would be great. Yes, if you have it, or you can.
Or do you want me to send it?
Why don't we share it with everybody if you think she won't mind? What is her